What's going on, everybody? I know y'all see the title. Today, we are talking about all things reverb when it comes to vocals. This is going to be a very in-depth video about using reverb on vocals. I'm going to do beginner, intermediate, and advanced. You'll know where we're at based on the timestamps in the video. As we continue to go more and more advanced, we're going to add more in-depth concepts, perspectives, and techniques. So watch it in parts if you need to. Get your notepads ready, fam. Let's go. So what is a reverb doing? A reverb is just simulating the reflective characteristics of a space. No need to overcomplicate it. So if you're in a room or a hallway, a parking garage, the only thing this plugin is attempting to do is simulate the reflective characteristics of that space. So let's talk about some of the basic controls of a reverb. We're going to start with the wet dry. Right now, I have this on the lead vocal as an insert. So the wet dry is just a blend between the dry signal and the wet signal. Fully 100% will be just hearing the reverb. At 0, we just be hearing that dry lead vocal. We're going to adjust this setting so we can create our reverb and lead vocal blend. Let's start at 0.
Dressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was in my bed. I just didn't ask any questions. Why must I guilty? I just be on my way. Long as I mind my business, I won't end up insane.
Now let's go to pre-delay. Now pre-delay is the time it takes for the reverb to kick in. So say you have your dry vocal right here hitting, that pre-delay lengthens the time to when that reverb is going to start playing after that dry vocal hits our ear. The higher this number is, the longer that pre-delay.
Dressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson if it wasn't in my bed. I just didn't ask any questions.
Also, one thing to note for that pre-delay, if you think that your reverb is muddying up your vocal performance too much, you can increase this pre-delay some to try to get more of that dry signal to hit your ear first, so it clouds that performance a little less. And now the time, or the decay time, or the decay, whatever it's called in your reverb plugin, is how long that reverb tail lasts. You can make it real long and washy, or you can kind of tighten that reverb and make it much shorter. Let's adjust that and hear those differences.
Dressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson if it wasn't in my bed. I just didn't ask any questions. Why must I guilty? I just be on my way. Long as I mind my business, I won't end up insane.
I don't use math to set either my pre-delay or my decay time. I go off of how it feels and how it works with the vocal performance. I want that reverb to breathe and perform and work with that vocal as well. I think if you just go off of that feeling and that emotion, you'll find your times a lot easier. And then we have our reverb types up here. So we have halls, room, chamber, church, plates, reverse, gated, nonlinear, echo verb, reso verb. Don't get too bogged down on the different types of reverbs. Just think about if you want a short reverb or a longer reverb. If you want a shorter reverb, go for a room, plate, nonlinear, gated. If you want something longer, go for a hall, chamber, church, plate, maybe even, and that's good. Okay, so on this vocal, for this example, we have had it on an insert. But if you would like to send multiple sound sources to this reverb and not have to put this reverb plugin on all of those sound sources, maybe you have a background vocal group, you can create a send. And I'll show y'all how to do that real quick. All you have to do is click here in Pro Tools and then go to new track. And then let's just call this reverb, enter. Now we have an aux right here. That is going to be our reverb send. And I'm going to change the color of it because I like to color code. And now this is our fader for how much volume we're going to send into this aux track. And we'll just move our reverb over here. And now we can turn our wet dry up to 100%. Now that our reverb is on this aux track, we can control our volume over here with this send fader. So let's turn this send all the way down to 0. We're going to play our vocal and we're going to just find that balance that we would like.
Dressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson if it wasn't in my bed. I just didn't ask any questions. Why must I guilty? I just be on my way. Long as I mind my business, I won't end up insane.
This is very helpful as well because if you remember when we were turning up the wet and dry, that dry vocal was getting swallowed into the reverb. This is a way so that you can have that reverb still be pretty prominent and audible, but it's not swallowing your lead vocal. Now I want to talk about reverb levels. This will be the last part of the beginner chapter of this video. There's 3 main reverb levels that I want to share with y'all. It's to be able to sense a reverb, which means you don't necessarily hear it, but you you sense it, you feel it. If you mute the reverb, you miss it. Something's gone. But if you bring it back, you just feel a little life to the vocal. I'm gonna show y'all where this level is right quick.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way. Long as I mind my business, I won't end up insane.
So it's about in that area. You can't really hear the reverb, but you can sense it. And if you bypass it, you're like, ooh, now I hear again that this is that dry, direct vocal and it's just right down the center and there's no space on it. This just gives you a little bit of space on something that you might need. The next level is the detect volume level. If you really listen, you can hear the reverb, but it's not loud and blaring. It's not a huge part of the vocal sound. It's just something that you can hear. There's obviously reverb on this vocal.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any questions. Why my...
You can audibly hear there's reverb on the vocal, but it's not so loud to where it's a huge part of the vocal sound. Now we're gonna go up to the you hear the reverb level. Now this is where we talk about the weekend, super reverbed out vocals, that type of level, where it's a part of the vocal sound.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way.
Around that level, that's the you hear it level. This is where that decision making comes in your mix, to where you're trying to find out what level you're wanting to use for your reverb. Just for an example, maybe your lead vocal might be on the detect and the ad-libs may be on you hear it, because there's no numbers to this depending on your situation. So those are terms that I like to use so that we could communicate the ideas better. So that was beginner. Now we're going to intermediate. Hope y'all ready. We're getting a little more advanced. We're gonna add some more controls to the conversation. Let's start with early reflections. We'll switch to this screen and we have our early reflections right here. Now, what are early reflections? This is super important at this level. Early reflections are those first reflections that have been reflected back maybe once or twice after those initial bounces off of parts in the room. Early reflections are very important to the human hearing. They give our brain information about the size of a room, the distance of a sound in the room. They give you some information over the sound of the character in a room, but they're very fast reflections. Like the direct signal comes and those early reflections are like 5 milliseconds or so right after that dry vocal hits our ears. Those early reflections are literally right behind it. So obviously with that information, it's important to know this so you can use this setting on your reverb to help you create depth in your mix. I do want to note you may not see an early reflections control on every reverb plugin that you use, but if you change the reverb type, that will also change your early reflection characteristics. Some plugins just do it behind the scenes for you. In this case, on this vocal, let's adjust these early reflections and see what changes we hear.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on.
Now, if I turn this all the way up and all the way down, when it's all the way down, I hear that vocal spring forward in the mix. It's not cloudy, it's not muddied up at all. But when I bring this up, it gets a little cloudy. It kind of sits it back a little bit in the mix.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way. Long as I mind my business, I won't end up insane.
When it's off, it seems like the vocal isn't competing as much with the reverb. But when I bring it up, it sounds like the reverb and the vocal are now mingling a lot. So I think that's an easier way to pick up on what's happening. I want to again touch on room types or reverb types because I don't focus too much on a specific reverb type being for certain instruments. I throw all of that out the window because remember, there are no rules and I don't like those limitations. I just go for the room sound that I hear in my head that I want to design. The reverb types are ways to help me get there faster. So if I want a more tinny sounding room, maybe I'll go for a plate. If I want a warmer sounding space, maybe I'll go for a hall or a church or something. I'm thinking about what characteristic do I want to add to this sound, and that will be how I choose my reverb type. The next control is the size. Now this is obviously the size of the room. At 100 is the largest size that this plugin, you know, will replicate. Down here, it's a smaller size room. Now, you see these early reflections, they change because if you're in a larger room, some of those early reflections will take a little bit longer to get back to you. If you're in a smaller room, those early reflections will get back to you much faster. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm gonna turn the reverb all the way down so we can just try and focus on the early reflections.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way.
Now, when that went from here to up in there, you can feel how claustrophobic it got. I felt like we're so close together. It's almost like we're in a closet. Now, you can use these things to your advantage to create sounds. This helps with room design because that's two obvious different rooms. Now, let's talk about diffusion / density, because sometimes on a plugin, this may be called density. On this plugin, diffusion is what signal is feeding the reverb tail. So if this is at 0, that means the direct signal, that dry vocal, is feeding the reverb tail. If it's at 100, that means the early reflections are feeding the reverb tail.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way. Long as I mind my business, I won't end up insane. Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any questions.
Okay, now we're gonna talk about damping, another important control. So right now, let's put this at 2. So the total decay time is 2 seconds, but with damping, you can make it so the high frequencies have a decay time of 1 second, or the lower frequencies have a decay time of 1 second, or you can make it longer than 2 seconds. Now think of it in a space. If you're in a club and someone's performing and there's a lot of people in there, maybe the natural reverb of that space will be a little darker and not as bright because the bodies are absorbing the higher frequencies of this reverb. Let's adjust the damping and here's some differences.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way. Long as I mind my business, I won't end up insane.
It's eerily similar to EQ, but it's not EQ. It's adjusting the time of how long the reverb decays at certain frequency ranges. Since we're at the intermediate level, we're gonna add some more techniques to your toolbox. We can continue to have the reverb on a send like this, but what I like to do is bring this send to 100, let that go and use the actual volume fader of the aux track so that I can control my volume. I can just adjust my volumes a lot faster, and now I can have multiple reverbs go here. So say if I wanted to just duplicate this real quick, I can do that, hit enter, and now I can have another reverb. Say I wanted a plate on this one, and I go right here and I got a plate, right? And I got a hall right there, and then maybe I want to duplicate this one more time. I can do that, and I can go right here and I have a room, and all I have to do is adjust these faders to blend. Just go room, go plate, hall. So I got a room. Let's listen.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any.
Now on this plate, maybe I want to bring it the damping down.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way. Long as I mind my business, I won't end up insane. Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it was.
And then we can blend this hall in.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way. Long as I mind my business, I.
Now I quickly have a unique reverb sound just by blending all of these reverbs together very quickly. Now we're going to talk about EQing our reverbs. So as you can see, a lot of reverbs come with EQ and we can adjust and mess with those. But I like to put EQs before and sometimes even after my reverb. I like to EQ out some low end, maybe some top end. Maybe there's a frequency in the vocal that's ringing out a little bit too much in the reverb. I can turn that down in this EQ before it even hits the reverb.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in my bed, I shouldn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl?
I may do something like that, bring this over here.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson. If it wasn't in.
So that gives me the brightness of the plate. That gives me just like some room tone on the room with this one. And then maybe I want to go a little darker on this hall.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson if it wasn't in my bed. I just didn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way.
Allows me to easily do that. Maybe sometimes your S's are making the reverb too splashy. Perfect time to just put a de-esser right before it.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson if it wasn't in my bed. I just didn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way.
Another technique to use. I also might want to EQ the output of the reverb just to shape that reverb tone even more. Maybe I want a little bit more brightness now that I've controlled the S's on this plate.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson if it wasn't in my bed. I just didn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just.
And maybe on here, I want a little bit less of the top end on this room.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson if it wasn't in my bed. I just didn't ask.
And then on here, I want a little bit less of that. Oh, this wonkiness going on this.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson if it wasn't in my bed. I just didn't ask any questions.
I can clean that reverb up or shape it or do whatever I want, however I deem fit. And then if I want, I can route this to another aux, and I can call this the verbs. And then we can route this to our vocal effects track. And then I can put a compressor on it. And we'll just color this that color for now. Put a compressor on it so we can do some sidechain compression. So we can still keep that dry vocal up front and just compress and tuck that reverb every time that lead vocal hits. And so we'll make the lead vocals our sidechain input.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson if it wasn't in my bed. I just didn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way.
And now maybe since we've got that where we want it, we might just want to put a little bit of compression overall on that reverb just to keep it a little more steady.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson if it wasn't in my bed. I just didn't ask any questions.
Easy. All right, now I hope y'all ready, because we finna go kind of advanced now when it's finna get a little crazy. So let's get into it. So now that we're in the advanced space, we're gonna bypass these plugins and we're gonna bring up good old TrueVerb. So we've got some new controls on TrueVerb. Also, one thing to note is we don't have reverb types on this plugin because you're able to make any reverb type you want with these controls on this plugin. But we have some new settings. We have dimension. Now this is one of my favorite settings on this plugin because these control the early reflections to help you create a 1-dimensional to 3-dimensional space. Now I'm gonna A/B it, right? So this is gonna be with 1 and this is gonna be at 399. And we haven't changed any other settings. We just left it alone and we just have the early reflections up. The direct is of course muted because we're on a send, and the reverb is muted just so we can focus on the early reflections. When it's on 1, listen to how 1-dimensional it sounds, like it's flat, which can be cool and can be a sound. You can use this to your advantage. But then when we go to 399, listen to how open and how much more depth and atmosphere there is on the vocal.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson if it wasn't in my bed. I just didn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way. Long as I mind my business, I won't end up insane.
Very subtle, but it just opens up, and now I hear the location of that lead vocal in a space, whether when it's on 1, it's like right here and it's kind of against the glass, which can be used to your advantage. If you have a vocal that you want to have some space on and you want it to be up front, you can use this to your advantage. So I really like using the early reflections on this plugin. Imagine doing 1 on a small room. Let's see what that feels like.
Stressing got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson if it wasn't in my bed. I just didn't ask any questions. Why my sad girl tears? I just be on my way. Long as I mind my business, I won't end up insane.
Fun to play with. And then we have distance. So this is, if it's at 40, you're further away. If it's at 0.5, you're closer. Again, something else you can use to create depth in your mix. I think that this distance works a little bit better on the actual vocal track than it does as a send. So oftentimes I'll do things like this on my background vocals or ad-libs to help place those in the back. But we'll just listen to this real quick.
Stressing, got me all up in my head, thinking about shit and reflecting. You was a lesson, if it wasn't in my bed, I just didn't ask any questions.
And then if we bring back our reverb, all this does is affect the balance of the reverb against the early reflections. And we of course got our decay time. In this plugin, density controls the initial buildup of reflections in the reverb, which, what does that mean? If it's up at 1, it sounds a little more full. If it's down here, even with the visual, it's a little less full, a little lighter sounding. And then basically what this stuff is down here, you see reverb damping, and then we have our EQ. This is a very powerful plugin because it really breaks down a lot of the important and useful controls of a reverb, and you can really get into it and learn a lot about it. So now that we've gone through the controls, we throw out all of this stuff, and now we talk about emotion. We talk about feeling. We talk about rhythm and groove. So I'm gonna bring up some sessions and we're gonna talk about that stuff. Okay, so we have a session up that I have done a mix breakdown on this channel for. If you want to check that out, I'm gonna attempt to use a card. Open that up in a new tab, finish watching this video, and then watch that video. I want to talk to y'all about creating space, atmosphere, creating emotion. What I'm going to do is I'm going to solo a lead vocal. And in this case, I've used some of the techniques. So you see, this is just lead vocal effects. It's one send, and I've sent all of these lead vocal effects to these auxes with just one send. And then I have all of my reverbs going to this verb fader while I've just done some EQ on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this lead vocal, and I'm going to mute all of the effects. So let's just hear this lead vocal.
You're out with your friends. You're ready to go. You're missing your man.
Now with.
You're out with your friends. You're ready to go. You're missing your man.
So let's break this down. So this first reverb I'm using, you can see it down here, is plate reflex. I'm using this Abbey Road's plate from Waves just to give me those first reflections.
You're out with your friends. You're ready to go.
So that's what we're using right there to initiate this vocal being in a space. Now at the level that I have it at.
You're out with your friends. You're ready to go.
Then I'll bypass that.
You're out with your friends. You're ready to go.
Very subtle. It's something you sense. And then let's go to the next one. This one's dark, sensual, bedroom, concert hall, whatever I was thinking. I'm using the Verb Suite Classics on this, and this is a live room. It's not even necessarily a hall, but what I did with it maybe made it feel like a hall to me.
You're out with your friends. You're ready to go.
I'm creating my space. Also with this one, another technique is using distortion or saturation on a reverb to give it some more character, to adjust the tone. And you can use it before or after the reverb. It just depends on what you're going for. I'll turn this up and we'll A/B that.
You're out with your friends. You're ready to go. You're missing your man.
A little bit of character, a little bit of distortion on it, and it gives me a nice texture to the reverb. At this level, you're not only just slapping a reverb on, you're using these reverbs to create character and texture to add to the performance and enhance the performance by putting it in a space that's familiar. This is adding just some grit, some realism to this reverb texture that I'm laying underneath the vocal. And now this Stone Age, freaky, I don't know what this was supposed to be, barbaric in this goodness, I don't know. But again, this is a kind of a sensual song, so I want to add a little something in there and make people want to do the do, you feel me? This is another Rooms, Deep Stone. Let's turn this one up and see.
You're out with your friends.
Now, if y'all hear that reverb, it sounds like cavey. It sounds like a vocal reflecting off of stone walls. And this is called deep stone. That's what reverb can do. This is something I do want to note as well. Like with reverb, I like to be very intentional about it because you can tap into people's memories subconsciously. We all, to a certain extent, know what it sounds like if someone is speaking in a cave, or if someone is in a wooden room, or if someone is in a hallway, or if someone is in a bathroom. Even if you don't have a music background, You know if it sounds like somebody was in a bathroom recording a vocal. You know what it sounds like when someone is speaking in a parking garage. So I like to use those things that just a normal average person who doesn't even know what reverb is can hear that and they're familiar with it. That somehow resonates within them subconsciously. On all of these, I'm EQing, high passing, and low passing on these before. I'm EQing these reverbs after, doing a little bit of compression on here, EQing and a little bit of compression on here, EQing a little bit of compression on here, and then EQing here, doing a little bit of mid-side EQ, just ever so subtly. Now, one powerful tool to reverb that isn't talked about much, but I want to give this to y'all because again, this is the advanced section. Chorus or using a flanger or some type of modulation on your reverb. This is a very slept on technique to adding more realism and liveliness to a reverb, because think about it, if you're in a space, that reverb isn't going to be this linear decay. It's going to move around. It's going to be affected by the people moving around in the room, by the people speaking and breathing in the room, by the AC units, by whatever else is going on in the room. So there's going to be some movement, some non-linearity in that reverb. And by adding a little bit of chorus or a little bit of flanging, that can help add a little bit more realism to your reverbs. In this case, I did that only on this live room one or this dark central bedroom concert hall verb right here, but you can mess with this a lot more just subtly on the reverb tail with a little bit of movement, and you can go a little extra with it and make it very audible and make it a creative effect. Okay, now that we've gotten through that, I'm going to go to another session and I'm going to show y'all some creative things when it comes to reverb in a couple different sessions, and I'm going to show y'all a special technique / trick that I use all the time with TrueVerb that I've never shared with anybody else. So if you stay to the end, you'll go. All right, so now we're going to get into some more creative things and kind of hammer in some of the concepts we've covered. I'm just going to play this lead vocal.
I done show my heart and it fell to pieces. It's a shame we play this game out no rhyme or reason.
So let's break this reverb sound down. I've used 2 reverbs for the main vocal, and on the hook, I've used a 3rd reverb. And again, that's another thing too, adding another reverb or switching out reverbs going from your verse to your chorus, just to add to that energy, add to that emotion and feeling of the song. On the first reverb, I want to talk about how I'm using this flanger. Let's listen to what it sounds like before I bring this flanger in.
I done show my heart and it fell to pieces. It's a shame we play this game out no rhyme or reason. I done show my heart and it fell to pieces. It's a shame we play this game out no rhyme or reason.
That feels like there's someone walking around in the room or there's people in the room. And with this song specifically, I wanted it to sound like he's doing an acoustic performance and there's people there watching him and he's using his voice to tell this story. To communicate that atmosphere, I'm using this flanger as some extra modulation. So it just gives me a little bit of movement. And you see, I don't need too much, it's 2%. It just makes it sound and feel like there's people there. And the reverb isn't as linear and stagnant. There's things going on in the room while this person is singing, which would be normal. Now I want to harp on the power of modulation on reverbs. Even in this specific reverb, I'm using the chorus and I'm using 22.1% of it. And then I'm adding just a little bit more with the flanger. It's adding those small variations that's similar to just hearing reverb in a real space. If you hear reverb in a space and you don't hear that modulation, it's like you're in the room by yourself. But in this case, I wanted to feel like there were other people in the room. So you get that sense of it and it can add even more emotion to a song, right? So that's one example of what I'm doing on all of these. I'm using a little bit of sidechain compression. I'm using some distortion on this one with the decapitator. I'm using some distortion here as well to add character and texture to these reverbs. We've already been over that. Now let's bring in the second reverb.
I done show my heart and it fell to pieces. It's a shame we play this game out no rhyme or reason.
Now that sounds kind of crazy, right? But this is again what we're creating with this space. Let's solo that one and listen to that one only.
I done show my heart and it fell to pieces. It's a shame we play this game out no rhyme or reason.
Let's bring the space reverb up. That sounds relatively normal. I've messed with some of these settings to be what I like. And then I got this echo boy on here at 0.1 milliseconds. Now this is where things get a little strange. And I've turned the saturation all the way up on AM radio. And this is where the mix is at 32.5%. Feedback is 0.01.
I done show my heart and it fell to pieces. It's a shame we play this game out no rhyme or reason.
Now this is where the creativity comes in. That sounds weird and phasey and strange, but blended in just a nice amount, it does something interesting to the sound. So when it's soloed and it was like that, it's weird. But if I have this first reverb and then I bring this one in,
I done showed my heart and it fell to pieces. It's a shame we play this game out no rhyme or reason. I done showed my heart and it fell to pieces. It's a shame we play this game out no rhyme or reason.
to me, it's now this interesting floor for the reverb, just something aesthetically pleasing to me. It sounds weird out of context, but with it, now I've created this interesting floor. And then I'm adding a limiter on it just to really keep it parked.
I done showed my heart and it fell to pieces.
It maybe only hits in one section when it's an issue. I'm doing a little bit of side chaining on it and a little bit of EQ on it. It's just things that you get to by experimentation and finding unique sounds that you like, oh, I don't know if anybody else has ever done this, but this sounds cool and it feels good. And then we're adding this one in the hook. So I'll go to the hook. In this one specifically, we have an reverb going into an echo boy again, but this is a quarter note delay. It's where the mix at 31.5%. Got a little more feedback on here. Saturation is going crazy as well. So let's hear this one.
I'll just be a hoe. I don't want no love from you. I'll just be a hoe. Can't end up just fucking you. I'll just be a hoe. I will never say I do. I'll just be a hoe. I'll just be a hoe. I'll just be a hoe.
Just a nice subtle reverberant delay floating in the background to add to that hook. Just give me a little bit more of that feeling as the hook comes in. Using a decapitator with a little bit of distortion, a little bit of drive on it, whatever. Sidechain compressing it, EQing it, compressing it a little bit of EQ before. Same things that we've all been over. And then I'm sending all these reverbs to a fader. I'm doing a little bit of mid EQ just so I can keep that lead vocal in the center. Now I'm about to show y'all the trick that I ain't never showed anybody. You're welcome. What I use for this is TrueVerb. So I'll bring up TrueVerb. I will turn off the reverb. I'm only going to use the direct and the early reflections for this. I'm going to be adjusting the dimension, room size, distance, and the decay time. And then we'll mess with some EQ or the early reflections if we need to. So these are some backgrounds that are jumbled up together in a cool way. And let's bring this lead vocal back so we can kind of juxtapose these backgrounds versus that lead. So I didn't actually do this on this mix, but this is something that I do often if I need a lot of separation in the mix. So what we're going to do is we're going to loop this section and we're going to bring this TrueVerb on and we're going to start adjusting these settings to hear how things change.
Entertainment won't commit, don't see no reason. 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 Entertainment won't commit, don't see no reason.
I know y'all hearing some changes, but let me break it down. So obviously distance, front to back, room size of the room, but also what this does for me, also with dimension, it's like how close together are these backgrounds? Are they singing together in a group over here or are they spread out amongst this space singing? You know, so I can use this to envelop that lead vocal or I can use this to really make those background vocals more of a concise package together and put them in a space if it's a cramped mix. And I can adjust the dimension to enhance that even more or less. So let's fine tune it.
Entertainment won't commit, don't see no reason. 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 Entertainment won't commit, don't see no reason.
Now let's A-B with this.
Entertainment won't commit, don't see no reason. Entertainment won't commit, don't see no reason.
immediately you hear how that lead vocal pops out. Those background vocals sit back a little bit and they sound in the background. It sounds like a performance. Like, it's kind of a crazy trick for depth. And now we're gonna enhance this even more. I'm gonna add another send, and then we're just gonna bring True Verb right over here just like this, and we're gonna turn the direct off, early reflex off, and bring the reverb on. And we're not gonna adjust nothing except this balance. We'll mess with the decay time and the pre-delay.
Entertainments won't commit, don't see no reason. 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 Entertainments won't commit, don't see no reason.
Okay, that's a cool starting point right there.
Entertainments won't commit, don't see no reason. Entertainments won't commit, don't see no reason. Entertainments won't commit, don't see no reason.
I'm gonna bring this damping down just a little more.
Entertainments won't commit, don't see no reason. Entertainments.
Now we're gonna A-B this.
Entertainments won't commit, don't see no reason. Entertainments won't commit, don't see no reason. Entertainments won't commit, don't see no reason. Entertainments won't commit, don't see no reason.
Those backgrounds really sit back in a space, and then you hear that reverb enveloping everything. I'm just showing you one example of how I would use it, but you can do so many things with this technique. And then of course I can go through and I can EQ and compress and adjust this reverb however I want. But it's such a cool technique to use to create depth. I could really make one video specifically about this and it could be crazy, but I'm giving this to y'all in this way, and go run with it. I'm hoping this translates through YouTube and y'all can hear that. Let me know if y'all can in the comments. I was gonna show y'all some more tricks, but I feel like this video is getting kind of long already. So if this was helpful to y'all, let me know in the comments. If you're liking the vibe, like and subscribe. And you know I cannot end this video without shouting out the YouTube members. So we got Entre Music, Tanga, Levon Trilla, mixed by Jay, Loop Layers, and we got a new one, a new member to the crew, True Art Pro Studio. Thank y'all so much for joining the YouTube membership and supporting this channel. Starting in January, we're gonna be doing the live streams where I'm giving mixed feedback and doing a Q&A only for the YouTube members. And I'm also going to be uploading live mixes and me doing live things. Like, I have videos that I've been recording of me tuning vocals and doing vocal editing, so y'all can see that process, really showing the behind the scenes of me doing things live, so y'all can see what it really looks like and what really goes on. As soon as these songs release, I'm gonna start putting that stuff out. Thank y'all so much for watching. If y'all haven't seen the video I did on 3D depth, check that one out next.